We are now halfway in to the NFL season. We asked you guys on our Monday stream, what dynasty video do you guys want to see this week? A lot of people suggested we go over the rookie class, kind of like a mid-season report card, talk about how we would redraft this class if we were doing a 2-round superflex rookie draft from scratch here. I think this will be a very fun exercise, give you guys an idea of how the market values have changed, give you an idea of, what we're looking at going forward with these players. Should be an interesting discussion and an interesting topic to talk about here. So we're going to get this thing kicked off with me picking at 101 here. There has been a change, of course, preseason. Our 101 was Caleb Williams. Caleb Williams will hear his name called very soon here because it is a super flex rookie redraft that we're doing. We're also going to do this from like a half tight end premium kind of frame of mind. Most of the leagues that we play in, most of the leagues that you guys play in have some element of tight end premium in them. So we're going to start things off with Jayden Daniels, who has now established himself as, if we redrafted this rookie class today, the 101 in drafts. And the reason for that is that he's just simply been better than Caleb Williams. That it really is all that it comes down to. You guys can see the quarterback class on the screen. We're going to be showing graphics throughout this of the quarterback, running back, wide receiver classes, and then Bowers included in there as well, with kind of how they've performed so far. You can see EPA per play. Jayden Daniels is actually leading all NFL quarterbacks. That's not just rookies, that 0.28. Yeah. He is leading all NFL quarterbacks with an 81.4 passing grade as well, which is a top 6 mark. PPR points per game, he is at 20.2, and that number for Drake Maye is a little bit fugazi because he's only started 2 games, but he has been outstanding. He is currently the quarterback 3 in keep trade cut value right now. I think just Josh Allen and CJ Stroud are ahead of him at this point in time, or maybe Lamar Jackson. I'm not sure which one.
I'll add the context right now. I'm very easily taking Jayden Daniels over CJ Stroud in Dynasty. The reason being is that we had our concerns about how quick he'd be able to adapt to NFL speeds in the passing game. We thought that the prospect himself, while he was very good stretching the boundary, while he's very good, feeding his deep shots, obviously guys like Brian Thomas, guys like Malik Nabers, what I questioned is what would his ability be to read the middle of the field against cover 2, to read the middle of the field against defenses. And what we've seen so far in his NFL career is that hasn't really been an issue for him. And the fact that he's looked so good, he's looked so efficient as a passer, has really been a stock up for me. Because again, that was my main question mark. I knew from an athletic perspective, from a rushing perspective, he would be there. My question was how would he quickly adapt to being an NFL level passer? And like you said, 5 of 6 games over 20 PPR points. We know what the fantasy upside is, but the fact that from a real life perspective, people are also talking about him as, offensive rookie of the year, completely changing around the Commanders. Both the in real life play, the narrative around Daniels right now, and what he does with his legs make him almost an untouchable asset in Dynasty, to the point where it would be take lock if I had him anything lower than quarterback 1 moving forward.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think the only argument you can really make as far as like where do you want to stack him up in overall startup rankings, because as of right now, I have him at 3rd overall. He is my 103 behind just Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson. And again, if you wanted to go more rebuild centric out of a startup, you could even make the argument that he's 101 because he's a lot younger than those guys.
Yeah.
The only real detractor I think that people are going to start to say, because he is currently banged up right now, is that, he's got to protect himself more. He can't take too many hits. He could be, a guy that gets injured, because that was an issue for him in college. He took too many big hits in college. He's now taken, a big hit in the pros, and he's got a rib injury now. If that continues to be the story of his rookie season, let's say he comes back from this rib injury in a couple of games, maybe he gets banged up with something else at some point. We saw it happen to Anthony Richardson after his rookie season, that people kind of threw that label on him that he was not going to stay on the field. And it's actually stuck with Anthony Richardson to this point. Yeah. That's one thing I would be a little concerned about if I was, just throwing Jayden Daniels all the way up 101 in Dynasty Superflex drafts.
Yeah, for sure. Obviously, he's dealing with the rib injury as we're recording this now going into week 8. But, what I keep defaulting back to is hyper rushing tendencies, 66 rushing carries in 7 games, 372 rushing yards in 7 games. On top of that, he hasn't, like you said, been an Anthony Richardson style passer. He's been efficient. He has a high completion percentage. He's actually throwing the football down the field. Just look at the overall aspect of this offense. I don't know, maybe it was the marriage between him and Cliff Kingsbury, but adding Jayden Daniels completely turned the complexion of the careers of guys like Terry McLaurin around. So when I'm looking at this Washington offense moving forward, I do have faith that when Jayden Daniels is healthy, again, like you said, that is the big caveat, staying healthy, there's really no holes to poke in his fantasy profile.
Yeah, and we saw even with Lamar Jackson after his rookie season, he added a little bit of muscle, added a little bit of size, was able to be a little bit more durable. That's something that Jayden Daniels is going to have to adapt to, but I think we can both agree that Jayden Daniels is a lot closer to Lamar Jackson than he is to Anthony Richardson as far as a play style comparison and just like what he means to an NFL offense versus with Richardson. He's not shown really any signs that he can be a capable NFL passer. Other than, some good pocket movement here and there and a couple flash plays. Jayden Daniels is operating at a high level already, and we kind of just detailed that with the EPA per play. But I'll let you take it away with the 102 here, a guy that we did have ranked 101 coming into the season.
That's not who I'm taking at 102. I'm taking Malik Nabers, wide receiver of the New York Giants. So it is very close for reference in my overall dynasty rankings. Jayden Daniels, obviously 103 overall, like you mentioned. I have Malik Nabers as my wide receiver 4, 7th overall player. And then I do have both Caleb Williams and another guy we'll mention in a second, rounding out my top 12 at 10 and 11, respectively. But I do have to give flowers to just exactly how dominant Malik Nabers has been. We are talking about, quite literally, one of the best wide receiver rookies we have ever seen. And not only just one of, I would make the argument that he has been the best rookie wide receiver we have ever seen. When we're looking at the numbers holistically, again, there's another guy in this class we have to give reference to in a second because he's been awesome in his own right. But over a 30% targets per route run rate, over 2.2 yards per route run, over an 80 PFF grade, 90 open store, like everything that we are looking at in terms of the peripherals for Malik Nabers line up. And then when you combine that with the fact that he is as dominant of a target commander on this offense, again, in the games he's been healthy, 7+ targets in every single game, and in 3 of those 5 games had over 10 targets. So when I'm looking at Malik Nabers, I think it's a very real possibility, not even a possibility, it's very probable that he is on a Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, Jamar Chase type of path. So again, while it is close between him and the quarterbacks, I just know Malik Nabers is so bulletproof at this point. Whereas although I'm very optimistic at the other 2 quarterbacks, they have some more question marks comparatively to a guy like Malik Nabers. And when we're talking about the overall market value, I think both Malik Nabers and those 2 quarterbacks hold elite standing in terms of market liquidity.
Yeah, it's funny you bring that up because I actually have Malik Nabers rated higher than you among wide receivers. He's my wide receiver 2 in Dynasty right now. So the only receiver I would take over Malik Nabers right now is Justin Jefferson. As the only player at receiver that I have ranked over him. Keep Trade Cut has Malik Nabers a little bit lower than you'd probably expect. Actually, no, he's at 105 overall. Sorry, I didn't actually see where he was ranked among overall startup rankings. So Keep Trade Cut is actually in agreement with you that he should be ranked over Caleb Williams in terms of startup rankings. For me, it's just kind of like if I was doing a startup right now, structurally, I like leaving with a quarterback in the early round. So that's why I would still prefer Caleb Williams because, I mean, between Williams and Nabers, they were both these superstar level prospects. Caleb Williams plays a harder position to adapt to in the NFL. We've seen the signs that he can be a dual threat quarterback, a high volume passer, and also he has this great, talent cast around him that we're starting to see kind of come to fruition. So it would be really close for me in a startup, but I would still prefer Caleb Williams.
Yeah, it's fair. For reference, in my top 12 startup rankings right now, I have 5 wide receivers and 7 quarterbacks in it. So that would be maybe the difference. You probably have it closer to 8 or 9 quarterbacks, I would assume.
Yeah, I believe I have 9 quarterbacks in the first round.
Yeah, that'd be the main difference. Because for me, again, CeeDee Lamb, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Malik Nabers all make up 4 to 7 for me. And then I also have Nico Collins and Amon St. Brown at 12 and 13, respectively.
Yeah, it's more just a difference. I think you definitely have a point ranking the high end portion of the board at wide receiver higher than, say like the mid QB1s, just because I think you could definitely make the argument that those guys are more of positional advantages than like, let's say the low end wide receiver 1s or the high end wide receiver 2s or whatever, versus like, is there a massive difference between Caleb Williams and, Kyler Murray or Patrick Mahomes or somebody that would be like further down the quarterback board in the like 9 to 11 range? That's definitely an argument to be had. But the way I look at it is, Malik Nabers most likely will never be the 101 in superflex drafts, whereas Caleb Williams definitely still could.
Yeah, and I don't disagree on that path for reference too. I also think the other quarterback, which, I mean, we're not going to spoil it quite yet.
Well, we could spoil it right now because we can talk about 104 here.
I may as well just take it. Drake Maye was obviously our golden child entering the NFL draft. He was a guy that, along with Caleb Williams, we viewed as the clear-cut consensus top 2 quarterbacks. Now, obviously, again, that'd be take lock if we had both those guys ranked over Jayden Daniels, which is why Jayden Daniels goes 1 in this exercise. But what we thought of both Caleb Williams and Drake Maye still remains intact. And in fact, I'm even more optimistic based off the signs we have seen in recent weeks of both these guys. So you already mentioned it with Caleb Williams. I mean, the other factor with Caleb is after a slow start, the guy has put up over 20 points in each of his last 2 games before the bye week. So very real possibility with how the Bears passing offense has looked. He could potentially heat up going down the stretch. Obviously, the passing grade in the EPA would be a little bit skewed right now because that is based off 9 quarters of football. But in terms of Drake Maye, the fantasy asset, I would make the argument that this is by far the worst supporting cast he will have throughout his New England tenure. Because as we know, Patriots aren't a great team right now. More than likely in the offseason, either they spend aggressive at wide receiver and draft a tackle, or draft a guy like Ted McMillan in the first round, spend that tackle. Regardless, the Patriots at this point are a team with a ton of cap flexibility, and it's going to have extremely high draft capital. And the early returns on Drake Maye have been that of somebody that could be 101 in the future. Because when we're looking at Drake Maye right now, 33 pass attempts in his first start against Houston, who are a pretty solid defense led by D'Amico Ryans, over 20 PPR points in that game. And then we saw in that Jacksonville game in London, 37 pass attempts, 2 touchdowns, very efficient, lost his number 1 target in the first quarter and was still as good as he was. When I'm watching Drake Maye, he has created the entirety of that Patriots offense. When we look at the situation of the quarterback position for New England, in the first 5 games, Jacoby Brissett had 2 passing touchdowns. In the 2 games Drake Maye has started, he has 5 passing touchdowns. So just by adding your rookie, raw, bad footwork quarterback, we instantly see signs of life for this Patriots offense. So moving forward, man, I have Drake Maye as my quarterback 7 in Dynasty, a guy I'd be willing to take at the 1-2 turn. Again, I was already high on him to begin with. If people are in the comments like, oh, you're way too high on Drake Maye. Yeah, I know. That's why I'm ranking him aggressively, because I think there's a real possibility he keeps doing what he's doing. We know he has mobility to him. Again, we watched him in depth at North Carolina. His junior season, he had 900 rushing yards and 10 plus rushing touchdowns. This guy can do it all. 6'4", 225 pounds, rocket arm, mobility. When we're mapping out a dynasty quarterback, I don't want to throw this lightly, but if there's someone to be the next Josh Allen, it's him.
Yeah, I mean, I think you could at least make the argument he's, Trevor Lawrence, Justin Herbert, only younger and has a little bit more upside for pass volume. I think the other thing that's really encouraging about Drake Maye is that Jacoby Brissett was never asked to drop back more than 35 times in the first 4 weeks of the season. And Drake Maye in his first 2 starts has dropped back 42 times. So they're actually letting him throw the ball a little bit more, which is weird because he's not a veteran quarterback like Jacoby Brissett is, and he's been able to escape and run and things of that nature. So yeah, I mean, definitely you could make the argument that Brock Bowers should be over him in terms of overall startup value. But like you said, we were high on Drake Maye. We had him as a mid to late second round startup pick going into the season, even despite the fact that we thought, hey, it might be a little bit of, learning that takes place in his first year. Maybe he doesn't start right away. We were very high on him before. So yeah, 1-2 turn, that's where he belongs.
Everybody on the market is adjusting to where we were at on him going into the year. So when he shows these type of signs, guys, we are going to be aggressive on our guy, Drake Maye, because we're looking forward. If he keeps doing what he's doing in the last 2 weeks throughout the rest of the season, we're talking about even quarterback 7, 11th overall player being way too low for where we'd be drafting him in the offseason. If he keeps continuing 19 plus points per game in his rookie season, we're not talking about a top 11 pick. We're talking about a top 4 or 5 pick.
Oh, yeah. It's very possible that all 3 of these quarterbacks are top 5 startup picks by the end of the year. It is very possible. And Caleb Williams, for what it's worth, too, had 7 big-time throws, 4 of which, he has 7 this year. All 4 of them came in the last 4 games. All 7 of them, came in the last 4 games. And his PFF passing grade has improved literally every single week of the season. So rookie quarterbacks, think even about CJ Stroud and Justin Herbert and some of the better rookie seasons we've seen. They don't peak weeks 1 to 3 or weeks 1 to 5 or whatever. They're going to peak as the season goes along. And I think all 3 of these guys from a redraft standpoint are top 12, top 15 rest of season quarterbacks. And from a dynasty perspective are only going to continue to gain in value. So if you're wondering, should I buy high on Caleb Williams, Drake Maye? The answer is yes. You should buy high on both of them, specifically on Drake Maye, because people are not adjusting to where he should be, like you made reference to there. I'm going to go ahead and take Brock Bowers because, man, this is the rookie wide receiver class with Brock Bowers included. And you can see that only Brian Thomas has a higher yards per route run. His yards per route run is higher than Malik Nabers' yards per route run. He has a 28% targets per route run rate. And among guys that are actually on the field running routes consistently, because AD Mitchell has a pretty good rate there, only Malik Nabers has been better. His PFF receiving grade is the best by far on this list here as well. So with Brock Bowers, I mean, you're looking at a guy that doesn't even have a quarterback, doesn't even really have a real legitimate coaching staff right now, and is still producing as the best tight end in fantasy as a rookie at 21 years old after having the most ironclad bulletproof prospect profile we've ever seen. Again, we were very high coming into the season on Brock Bowers. We thought he was a top 2 to 3 tight end. And we knew by week 4 of his rookie season, it was very possible he had already locked down and nails the tight end 1 overall in Dynasty spot. I'm telling you right now, not only is he the tight end 1 overall in Dynasty, he is a solid first round pick asset apart from everybody else
I
at
don't
the position.
disagree.
Sam Laporta, Trey McBride, whoever you think is next up at tight end in Dynasty, or maybe even you think they're still ahead of Brock Bowers, he is a full first-round pick more valuable than those players.
Yeah, I think you covered it fully. I mean, just look at his last 3 games. Obviously, again, he's been good across the full season, but what we have seen in these last 3 games, once Devontae Adams was basically ruled out, the hamstring issue, gets traded, like that whole saga that was going on. Brock Bowers, 12 targets, 10 targets, 14 targets. Each of those weeks, respectively, he was 23.7 PPR points, 16.1 PPR points, and 19.3 PPR points. We're not talking about a tight end here. We're talking about a wide receiver being classified as a tight end. That is what he's operating at as this offense. And I mean, like you said, if we were willing to value Kyle Pitts as a top 15 overall startup asset, top 10 overall startup asset just 2 years ago, and that was even with the context that he had a disappointing second year, what are we doing with Brock Bowers, man? The only sample size we have of Brock Bowers in the NFL with Pitts, it was one great year and one so-so year. With Brock Bowers, all we're seeing is elite play so far.
Yeah, dude, it's literally all gas. And not to mention, too, the part of the reason why we were so high on Pitts relative to the rest of the position is that we would say things like Kyle Pitts is a full first-round pick more valuable than anybody at this position, because at the time, the only guys that were near Kyle Pitts were older. It was George Kittle and Travis Kelce and Darren Waller and guys like that at the time that we were kind of talking about as the second tier of tight ends in Dynasty. And then maybe you were up there with like a Freiermuth or a Goddard who was a little bit younger. But man, Bowers is young and he's the best producing tight end in fantasy right now. That is a combination that is rare. And again, maybe Sam Laporta can bounce back. Trey McBride's still a good option. But I think at this point in time, there is no debating that Brock Bowers has very easily cleared those guys.
Yeah. No, I completely agree at this point. I mean, my current tight end 2 in Dynasty is Trey McBride, who I really like, but at this point, like you said, like there is a big discrepancy between Bowers and the field. And the fact that we're talking about that as the 5th overall player in this class goes to show you how special this 2024 class has ended up being, because the guy I'm taking at 106 in many other classes, you'd be arguing as a top 3 overall player. And no, I'm not talking about Marvin Harrison Jr. I'm talking about a wide receiver. I have recently moved over Marvin Harrison Jr., Brian Thomas Jr., wide receiver of the Jacksonville Jaguars. And I mean, we may as well just throw this right up on the screen so people who are questioning, well, how the heck are you drafting Brian Thomas over Marvin Harrison? I mean, Marvin Harrison was a top 4 pick. Brian Thomas was a top 20 pick. You had Marvin Harrison as a generational wide receiver prospect. Brian Thomas, while you liked him, was much lower in your rankings. Like, how do you have Brian Thomas Jr. so far ahead right now after, 6 games in their NFL careers? This is how. 2.6 yards per route run. It's a near 80 PFF grade. We are talking about a dominant wide receiver 1 in the NFL as soon as his rookie's here. If I read you off what Brian Thomas Jr. has currently done so far, and we apply that to Marvin Harrison Jr., we'd be arguing Marvin Harrison Jr. as a top 2 overall pick next to Malik Nabers right now. Brian Thomas Jr. is currently the wide receiver 8 in PPR scoring. And when you look at his recent track record, in the last 3 of his 4 last games, has scored over 20 PPR points. That is despite a dysfunctional Jaguars offense. Trevor Lawrence leaving points on the field for him. Again, even though we like Trevor Lawrence, is he the most accurate quarterback on a down and down out basis? Absolutely fucking not. Because when you watch those Jaguars games, the one constant on a down and down basis is Brian Thomas Jr. being wide open down the field. And sometimes it connects and we see 20 plus PPR points, and sometimes Trevor Lawrence has missed them. But what I have seen for Brian Thomas, the separator, the 3-level threat, he reminds me of Nico Collins. And that was my comp for him coming in. I thought, okay, maybe he's a little raw right now, but if he develops, he can turn into Nico Collins. Guys, you know what I think about Nico Collins. The jersey's fucking hanging behind me right now. I think if Brian Thomas Jr. continues on this development path, we're looking at a top 5 NFL wide receiver.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think he's definitely on that trajectory. Now, I am remaining strong in the Marvin Harrison still more valuable than Brian Thomas Jr. camp, but I'm wavering. I'm wavering, man. Like, I'm not going to lie. I can't sit here and say with a straight face that Marvin Harrison's prospect profile being as superior to Brian Thomas's as it was is enough to say that he should still 100% be ranked over him. I personally prefer Marvin Harrison. We'll talk about him later today in redraft trade target stuff. But Marvin Harrison is definitely not having as great of a rookie season as Brian Thomas Jr. I, however, will not make the change until I see enough of a sample size of Thomas being the better receiver, which he definitely has been to this point in the season. to actually make that switch. It'll probably be by like week 10, week 11 that I will make that switch if it happens, but I am still holding out hope that Marvin Harrison Jr. can be the wide receiver 1 overall in Dynasty and should still be ahead of Brian Thomas Jr. because I like his quarterback situation a little bit better going forward. I like the way he's being, deployed as far as like he's the clear alpha. NFL defenses are respecting him, but it is very, very clear that Brian Thomas Jr. has had the better rookie season. So I will take Marvin Harrison next year. I think both of these guys represent like back end of the second round caliber assets in an overall startup, which just tells you how good this class has been so far, that we're 7 players deep and we're still talking about top 24 guys.
7 of the top 24 picks.
Landscape. Yeah, these guys are absolute studs so far. So the fact that Harrison is down at 107 when he was the 102 or whatever, 103 off the board in most people's rookie drafts, it's not necessarily that he's been bad. He hasn't been perfect, but he has been worse than the rest of these guys.
Yeah, and the only reason why I'm here is that, again, I had Marvin Harrison not only a tier higher, probably 2 tiers higher when I was doing it as a pure prospect. Like Marvin Harrison, the prospect at Ohio State, was a much better prospect than Brian Thomas Jr. But I'm telling you right now, if Marvin Harrison Jr. right now was number 6 in the NFL in receiving yards, we'd be talking about him as a top 5 overall startup pick. So what Brian Thomas Jr. is doing right now, and he's still, back end, mid to back end round 2 type of pick, just goes to show you that people will hold on their pre-draft biases. I'm ready to do it. Like Brian Thomas Jr. has showed he could be a superstar talent. And while I think Marvin Harrison Jr. will eventually become that, it's almost like the mystery box versus the card. It's like we already know Brian Thomas is a card. He's already an elite NFL wide receiver. What are we hoping Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to be?
I think the NFL defenses are already treating Marvin as an elite NFL receiver. Marvin Harrison Jr. has a week so far this season where he was the wide receiver 1 overall in points per game. So it's not like he's not producing. It's not like he's done nothing. He's had 3 unlucky games in a row where he suffered a concussion in one, had a tough matchup in another. Again, I am not going to make any sweeping declarations that Marvin Harrison Jr. has disappointed or has been a bust or whatever until I see at least 5 more games of his rookie season.
And for reference, this is 100% more pro Brian Thomas than it is anti-Marvin Harrison. So, I mean, with that being said, I'm at the 108 now, and we do see a little bit of a tier gap, I would say. I think, like you said, those top 7 assets, all top 24 overall picks. We move down tier to a guy that I have ranked 34th overall in my startup rankings. And even though he hasn't played a single down this year, I would argue that his value has gone up because of the overall security we have seen with this Minnesota offense. If you're telling me Kevin O'Connell and this supporting cast can make Sam Darnold an MVP candidate, I'm extremely excited for the quarterback they took in the top 10 overall with J.J. McCarthy. Obviously, again, I was already higher on the talent. I'm a Michigan guy. I was always saying last year how much he meant to difference for that Michigan offense. And by the way, with how Michigan has played this year, I think people are starting to smarten up to that because when you lose a top 10 level quarterback with the mobility, with the arm talent, with the outer structure of play that J.J. McCarthy has been, I mean, like you said, we take a Michigan program that was undefeated and looked like the clear best team in college football last year to now this year. The one thing in Michigan circles is, what the hell are we doing at quarterback? It's crazy to me how much J.J. McCarthy masked so many of those offensive issues just by being the talent that he is. And like we said, with Sam Darnold, we know that Sam Darnold at this point has been playing very good football. But what we also know is that Sam Darnold is going to be a free agent after this year, is more than likely going to sign somewhere for 30, 45, 40 million per year. Probably like a bridge contract close to like what you guys signed Baker Mayfield to. If Darnold keeps doing this, he's going to sign a contract there with the Raiders, with the Giants, with the team like that. And J.J. McCarthy on his rookie deal with those weapons, extremely exciting. Because when we're talking about the overall quarterback landscape in Dynasty, where J.J. ranks amongst his pack. So I currently have him as my quarterback 16, but if he does what Darnold is currently doing with the Vikings at 22 years old, we are talking about he's going to be ranked over Trevor Lawrence. He's going to be ranked over Brock Purdy. He's going to be ranked over Dak Prescott, Justin Herbert. I think if he goes into next year and in the first 5 games, he's averaging 19 plus points per game, I think we're having real conversations about J.J. McCarthy versus Patrick Mahomes in the market.
Yeah, I think the value accumulation makes it so that you probably have to put him this high. I would love to take Rome Odunze over him right now. And I think, again, Odunze at the moment has not had a great rookie season so far, and he will be my next pick. I will take Odunze here, but you can't take him over McCarthy yet. If Odunze, post rookie bump or whatever, he just had his bye, he's going to come out hopefully and perform at a higher level. If we see that, if we see 2 yards per route run type games and 25% target share or whatever, then yes, you would take Odunze over McCarthy and he'd be a top 3-ish round startup pick. But as of now, I think the mystery box is worth it with JJ McCarthy because all the signals that we've seen is Jefferson's dominant. Addison's great. Haven't even seen Hawkinson on the field yet, which is insane. Coaching is awesome. Protection is great. McCarthy looked okay in the preseason games that we saw him. Darnold is an MVP candidate, which nobody saw coming. And like you said, I think it's very clear to me that Darnold is overperforming relative to his talent. And he is, by definition, right now, a system quarterback. And that is where I'm at with it. And I think McCarthy is more talented than Darnold. I think he's got more confidence than Darnold because Darnold, of course, had to go over all of that stuff that he went through the first couple of years of his career. And McCarthy's a clean slate and he's getting to sit back and learn for a full season. I do definitely think we could see a Jordan Love level ascension from JJ McCarthy the second he's starting games for the Minnesota Vikings. So totally agree with you on that pick. Like I said, Odunze would be my next ranked player here in terms of overall grade. Again, 1.16 yards per route run, 13.7% targets per route run, 59.6 PFF grade, 57% or 57 open score. The metrics aren't great right now. It's Matt Harmon actually charted a couple of his games early in the year, and he said he's kind of right on par with, a rookie receiver kind of learning the ropes of the NFL. I think Odunze is going to have a better second half of the season than we've seen so far to this point, but at the same time, I am projecting that. I don't know that for sure, so that's why he has to be down here at 109. Odunze was still a top 6 to 8 overall prospect in our prospect model. I believe wholeheartedly in the prospect. I believe in the quarterback. I believe in the system and the situation more than I did before with Shane Waldron. Right now, he's shown a little bit of improvement as a play caller. So that's where I'm at with Odunze at 109. To me, I have him ranked, just outside of my top 3 rounds-ish of overall rankings in startups. So I think he'd be about a 3-4 turn pick for me as it currently stands right now.
Yeah, no, I think that is the correct pick. So he would actually also be my pick right now. I currently have him ranked 109, and I do view it as a sizable gap even still after Odunze. People might be hearing this saying, how do you have Odunze still so high? He's currently my 38th ranked player in my overall board, so a guy I'd be willing to take in the early 4th round portion. And like you said, I mean, the metrics are not great. I mean, we could just show them back on the screen for those of you that are curious. Again, 1.16 yards per route run, not good. 13.7% targets per route run, not good. Low PFF grade. So the metrics aren't good with Rome Odunze. However, the Bears just had their bye week. Like I said, Caleb was looking his best prior in the 2 games before the bye week. It's up to Rome Odunze to just start playing better. And again, Keenan Allen's been dealing with some lower body injuries all year. We know DJ Moore's there. But with how much the Bears have thrown the football, if Rome Odunze is anything close to the prospect that I thought he was coming into the NFL, we're looking at a guy that has a top 30 level wide receiver appeal moving forward in redraft. So if he finishes as a top 30 wide receiver rest of the season, maybe even top 24 if he keeps improving as a player, is he going to be much higher than this 109? Probably not, considering that we would still take, Marv, Brian Thomas, et cetera, over him. But could he jump over JJ McCarthy? That would be the one spot I think we could flip.
Yeah, and I think among veterans, he could go from like a early 4th round pick to like a early 3rd round pick or something like that. And that would be kind of the jump that he takes. It's not so much among rookies. It's more so just above, some of the wide receivers or running backs or quarterbacks or whatever that would be ahead of him right now. So I took Rome Odunze with the 109. What are you looking at here with 110?
So my highest ranked player left, and again, this is another tier break, I would say, because we go from Rome Odunze at 38 to this guy I have ranked at 62. And I mean, we already talked about my pre-draft wide receiver 4, so we may as well mention yours. Xavier Worthy, wide receiver of the Kansas City Chiefs. Very promising usage in the first game without Juju Smith-Schuster. Now, obviously, recent news, they just trade for DeAndre Hopkins. We'll see how that dynamic kind of changes moving forward. But with Xavier Worthy, he's still attached to Patrick Mahomes from a value insulation standpoint. And like you said, while it hasn't been the greatest rookie season thus far, we have seen glimpses of him opening up down the field and him and Mahomes not being on the same page. With Xavier Worthy, if he has a stretch where he is the wide receiver 8 overall in points per game, let's just say a 3-game stretch, he's averaging 17 points per game in that stretch, we could be talking about a guy from a market value standpoint that pushes up to top 15 overall wide receiver status at any point. And if that were to happen, I would actually be willing to sell off at that point. But it almost feels like at 110, I'm buying him at a fair market right now. And if anything positive were to help happen moving forward, we know that market value is going to increase. So while I do like, McConkey, Jonathon Brooks, some of these other wide receivers, maybe a Bo Nix, Michael Penix in this range, I do view it as a flat tier. To me, when I'm looking at the pieces that could gain incremental value over a 3-week stretch, is Xavier Worthy.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you at all on how his value could change. The problem I think I have with Xavier Worthy right now, and I actually wouldn't have taken him there, I would have taken McConkey over him, is that the underlying metrics aren't good in addition to the situation right now. It's not like Xavier Worthy's underlying metrics are a death nail because Patrick Mahomes is playing at an MVP level. Like if he had, and you guys can see them on the screen, 1.19 yards per out run, 16% targets per out run, a 62 PFF grade. If he had that stuff and Mahomes was playing like Mahomes, I would be a lot more concerned for Xavier Worthy than I am right now. Yeah. But the whole offense isn't playing at a high level. So that is, I guess, bullish news to some degree.
14 targets in his last 2 games.
Yeah, and he's, like you said, his usage has improved in recent weeks. So he's a guy that I think it will be worth monitoring. He's also one of the youngest receivers in this class, and he was a little bit raw coming out of school. So I'm sure he's going to learn and probably look better in week 14 than he looks right now. So he's a guy that has perked my ears up so far as what I've seen from him from like a usage standpoint and a metric standpoint. I need to see more from him, but yeah, he looks like a rookie receiver. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, I mean, him and Odunze, I would say obviously Odunze I had a tier above as a talent perspective coming into the NFL draft, but both are in a way the pieces that I think have the opportunity to gain the most value because both are underperforming by their own standpoints. And like we said, if Rome Odunze has a stretch as well, if either of these guys has a stretch as a top 15 overall wide receiver in fantasy through a 3-week time period, we're going to be talking about the Rome Odunze, who Caleb Williams handpicked, top 10 overall pick, is going to be insulated. Or we're talking about Patrick Mahomes' number 1 wide receiver for the long term. Obviously, Kelsey getting older, DeAndre Hopkins getting older, who they just traded for. Like, I could see the path for both these guys gaining a ton of value. And the reason why I would prefer both to Lab McConkey, who you're taking next, is that because of the nature of the passing volume of this current Chargers offense, I have a hard time seeing a stretch where he completely crushes. Do I think he's a safer bet right now than what both Odunze and Worthy have shown? Absolutely, because like you said, the peripherals are absolutely there. The problem that I have with McConkey, though, is the passing volume just hasn't been.
Yeah, I guess I'm just looking at it from I'm trusting the talent of McConkey so far with the, again, similar draft capital to Worthy. There's not a huge difference between the 28th overall pick and the 34th overall pick. 24% targets per out run rate so far, 71 PFF grade, 1.69 yards per out run. And again, you got to keep in mind too that he's a short area target, so his yards per out run similarly not going to be as high as somebody like Worthy's who gets his targets mostly downfield. But yeah, I feel comfortable that McConkey is looking like a real difference-making rookie receiver. And I can't say that about Worthy right now. So that's the difference for me there. I do have McConkey and Worthy, I guess, both a little bit higher than you in terms of my overall rankings. I have McConkey right now at 50 and Worthy at 54. So they are a little bit higher relative to where you mentioned you had them in like the 60s or whatever. But that's where I'm at with those two guys. I do think, in the 5th round or whatever, or 6th round of a startup is where I would feel comfortable taking them. I think they're both worth probably, late 1st round, maybe mid to late 1st round pick capital in 2025 if you guys were going to look to buy them. But I will say each of them has cause for concerns. With McConkey, it's the pass volume. Like you said, I don't think that's going away anytime soon. Greg Roman's going to be there for a while. Jim Harbaugh is going to be there for a while. Justin Herbert is virtually useless for fantasy right now. He's looks like if you watch the game against Arizona, he looks like a good quarterback still. He still looks like a great quarterback. It's just they're not throwing the ball or operating in a way that is conducive to Ladd McConkey having this like monster season.
I mean, we may as well just hash this real quick. Another positive for the pro McCarthy stance is that people said, the Michigan wasn't throwing the ball a ton because of JJ McCarthy. It's like, well, we've seen Jim Harbaugh get Justin Herbert and turn him into JJ McCarthy.
Sorry, could you repeat that point just because your mic kind of blasted when you said Justin Herbert?
Yeah, and I guess you can also make it as a pro JJ McCarthy stance because, I mean, the common narrative going into the NFL draft was, McCarthy's not throwing the ball a ton because Jim Harbaugh doesn't trust him. It's like, does Jim Harbaugh also not trust Justin Herbert? Because that's basically how he's used Justin Herbert. Yeah,
JJ McHandoff was getting some reparations here as far as his usage. Let's tackle the 112 here, Danny, and then maybe we'll just go like 30 seconds at a time for the next ones, or do we want to just do this as a 1-rounder? I'm trying to think how we want to actually structure this thing. I think people will want to see the 2 rounds, so let's just go really rapid fire for the 2nd round after this 112.
So I'll make it very simple. Jonathon Brooks is my 112 simply because this feels like the spot to take his upside, pretty much. We know the running back position as a whole is barren with young, efficient talents that can reach the top of the dynasty board. Because outside of Achane, Gibbs, Brees, Bijan, we're really yearning for that next young, up-and-coming running back. And with Jonathon Brooks, he was the RB1 in the class. Panthers traded up for him. Again, are there potential short-term concerns with Chuba Hubbard playing as well as he has been? Absolutely. But to me, when you're looking at the worst team in the NFL, trading up, trading draft capital to get this type of running back in the second round, it's very positive for Jonathon Brooks. Again, 12 feels like the sweet spot because I would say 13 and on, there's a lot of underperforming players so far. With Jonathon Brooks, I don't think at this point you can take him over any of the guys that went in the top 11. But if you told me we redid this exercise, Jonathon Brooks was the RB12 down the stretch of the year, and we were taking him as the 109 off the board, I wouldn't be shocked.
Yeah, I think I'm on the same page with Brooks. He seems like the type of guy that, if you recall, like Cam Akers, Javonte Williams as rookies, we were excited to see what they did at the end of their rookie seasons. And then going into their second seasons, they saw a big rise in value because Chuba Hubbard is actually a free agent after this year. And also, too, I think we can kind of just project forward that Jonathon Brooks is going to be the starter there. We don't know what they're going to do at quarterback. We have no idea if Bryce Young's getting back in there at some point, if Andy Dalton's going to start the whole season. Not exactly sure how it's going to look going forward, but I do think that Brooks is a guy that, similar to McCarthy, it's like he hasn't really gained any value, hasn't really lost any value, but you could probably talk yourself into him, gaining a little bit of value because at least Canales looks like he's a competent coach and can scheme up an offense.
For sure. And I mean, Brooks' talent is a 3-down profile. Even if it's a bad team, it's like, well, Jonathon Brooks is very capable in the receiving game to the point where, I mean, we've seen it in other instances in the league. Is it the most efficient offense? No. Are they going to be peppered with a ton of volume because it's a bad offense? Absolutely. So Jonathon Brooks, I mean, it almost feels like he's got like Rashad White upside in the receiving game, except he's actually a good rusher between the tackles.
Yeah, no, that's a pretty good way of putting it. So let's go through. We'll go through like 30, 45-second rapid fire for each guy. Bo Nix is the guy that I have ranked here at the 201. I've liked some of what I've seen from Bo Nix. I think he's a good runner. He's been relatively productive.
Very
from
mobile.
That aspect. I mean, 15.5 PPR points per game as a quarterback, as a rookie in an offense that doesn't really have a whole lot of talent is pretty good news for him. Sean Payton looks like he's kind of scheming up what he does well, which is a good thing for him. And I think when rookie quarterbacks run right away and they're just comfortable running, that allows them to figure out the NFL a little bit more easily than, let's say, a pocket passer who can't run. So I feel pretty good that Bo Nix is going to start to show signs of improvement. Troy Franklin's playing better. We're seeing some of the supporting cast, Javonte Williams running the ball a little bit better right now. So I feel okay about Bo Nix. Again, do I think he's gone up or down in value? Probably not. I think he's about stayed the same from where I had him. But he's starting games. He's running the ball. If he starts to look better as a passer, I think he could really rise in value.
Yeah, again, has he been a world beater? No, but fun fact too, he's currently the quarterback 14 in fantasy. And that's been on the back. I mean, if you look at his overall rushing production too, has it been the smoothest sailing in terms of the passing game? Absolutely freaking not. I mean, I still remember that week 1 game, for example. It looked pretty ugly, but I'll bet that was his first career NFL start. But when you actually look at the rushing yardage, and this was a very underreported thing from him coming out of Oregon, because people talked about, oh, system quarterback, he's an efficient point guard. It's like the guy can scoot a little bit. We look in, what is that? 5 of his 7 NFL games so far, 25 plus rushing yards. And we have 2 of them with over 60 rushing yards. So again, is it Jayden Daniels level rushing production? Not necessarily. Is it an absolute plus having a quarterback that can get 40 plus rushing yards per game? Absolutely. So I won't spend more time on that because we pretty much know what Bo Nix has been. The guy I will spend more time on, though, is Keon Coleman. I think he would be my next pick here. It's been a very inconsistent season. Again, that's when you get to this range of rookies, you're not going to find, the week over week studs like Malik Nabers, like Brian Thomas. You kind of have to project a little bit. However, with Keon Coleman, we knew he was raw coming in, has been a little bit inefficient at times, but also has shown some really good flashes at other times. So at this point, we know he's attached to Josh Allen. I think this is the appropriate draft capital for him.
Yeah, he struggled to get separation. You can see the open score and the reception perception samples to say basically that exact fact. But 70.4 PFF grade, 2.0 yards per run. Pretty solid metrics for a guy that is never going to be the best separator in the world. Like he is never going to be a reception perception darling. Your best case scenario here is he is a Cortland Sutton. He is a, George Pickens or whatever, some type of guy that is not going to be the most elite separator in the world, but he's very, very young still. And I think for a 20-year-old or barely 21-year-old receiver, he's looked pretty good. And the sneaky upside of Amari Cooper coming in, I think, too, is that he can learn from Amari Cooper. Amari Cooper's a good route runner. He can learn kind of the techniques and, the drills that Amari Cooper runs in practice.
For sure. So we'll move on to the next pick. And I mean, we talked about Bo Nix. We may as well take the final first round quarterback here with Michael Penix. It is
Well,
a
it's my
little bit.
pick actually. So
Oh, my apologies.
you
My
don't
apologies.
actually get to make this pick. I
Sorry,
don't
my
think, but
apologies. I thought it was
I
my
am
fault.
caught between Michael Penix and another player. It
I know it
probably
is.
would be Michael Penix versus Xavier Legette for me, because also similarly to Keon Coleman, I expected worse, to be honest, to start the season. I think that both Keon Coleman and Legette have shown more in their first couple of games than what we've seen from, what we thought of them coming out of college, which is that they're raw prospects, not very good route runners, things of that nature. So I'm going to go with Legette here. I think that Penix would definitely be in the conversation there, and I'm sure you're going to take him there. But Legette is getting the ball in creative ways. He's had, some productive weeks here and there, and it's a young team. They're rebuilding. It's very clear. I think that Legette will have a nice second half of the season. So I'm kind of projecting forward with him, but I like the first round receiver who's showed some plays.
Yeah. No, again, my apologies there. I miscounted, but Xavier Legette, funny enough, was my 16th overall rated player, so would have been my 204, my next pick. So with Xavier Legette, I have him one spot actually behind Michael Penix, who I kind of alluded to. I would have taken at that 203 spot. Michael Penix, it's pretty much just a constant valuation in the sense that this is about where I had him in the rookie draft cycle. He's done nothing on the field because he hasn't played to dictate he should be lower or higher than this, but also it's first round quarterback, top 15 overall quarterback installation, 8th overall pick in the NFL draft. Kirk Cousins has looked good, but honestly, I am even more optimistic, like JJ McCarthy, for when Michael Penix takes over. I am more confident in this overall skill group. I'm confident in the offensive line. I'm confident that Drake London has taken even a further step into superstardom level territory at wide receiver, a guy that people had question marks coming into the year. Again, we were always believers in Drake London, but the step he has taken has been that of a Puka Nacua in terms of what this offense has been. We know Kyle Pitts in terms of being able to stretch the field at the tight end spot. I feel very good about this overall weapons group. And as we know with Kirk Cousins, older quarterback, still coming off that Achilles tear, while he has looked good, if he misses any time and Penix starts for a 4-game stretch and he absolutely lights it up, we're talking about a guy that would be one of the biggest value accruals in all of fantasy football. So for me, 15th spot where I have him ranked 204 overall, 16th overall here where I took him in this draft. And I really feel like this is the floor over his projection. The way I think of Michael Penix is, do I think he's got the ceiling that Jordan Love has shown taking over Rodgers? Not necessarily, but could he have that type of value accrual where he instantly becomes a top 12 overall dynasty quarterback once he starts on this Falcons team? I can see that type of Jordan Love-esque path.
Yeah, one thing that makes me a little intrigued about Penix too is the fact that he actually tested very well coming out of college, and we never saw him run in college. So I'm like, what if he actually runs a little bit more in the NFL than people are giving him credit for? That would be something that would really unlock his fantasy value a little bit. Yeah. He is like, bar none, the single best asset you could trade for if you're tanking right now. Like he is literally the best asset you could trade for. He is guaranteed profit at his cost right now.
100%. So with Penix, again, early second round. In other classes, he could even potentially be a first-round pick. That goes to show you the class.
Yeah, for sure. This is an interesting spot here because you could maybe start to talk me into some of the running backs that have looked good, or maybe even Benson too, because he was the guy that we really loved coming into the class. You could also talk me into Pearsall now because of Ayuk's injury, and some of he was a first-round receiver and that type of stuff. I actually am going to go with Pearsall. I think him and Mitchell have both been obviously Pearsall he's played one game and we don't really have much to go off of, but he got shot in the offseason. So I don't really feel comfortable saying that it's his fault that we haven't seen much of him. Ricky Pearsall is going to have a chance to prove himself over the next couple of games. And I think this is, again, a very, very easy projection for me to say that he is going to look like a separator and probably catch some passes, maybe look like a rookie at times, but he had a chance to sit back and watch a little bit from, pros like Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel and stuff for the last couple of games. And Deebo's going to be out for a little bit here. Brandon Ayuk, of course, not going to be back probably until like mid next season at full strength. So I feel comfortable that Pearsall would be able to gain quite a bit of value as well.
Yeah, I think Pearsall is a very solid pick here. Again, I actually do have Mitchell slightly higher, but I do think this overall range, like once you get to legitimately 17 to 24, I think you can make a case for a bunch of these guys. So really don't mind the Pearsall show, especially if he can build some momentum, obviously with more snap availability with Brandon Ayuk dealing with the ACL and with Deebo Samuel dealing with the pneumonia. So I will just take the AD Mitchell. Again, this is more of a trust what your eyes are telling you type of take, because when we're looking at AD Mitchell, he hasn't really filled up the box score. But when you look at the peripherals, they have been pretty solid, over 1.3 yards per route run compared to some of the other receivers in this class, higher than Worthy, higher than Leggett, for example, 32.5 target per route run. And that was the main thing I noticed, is that this guy's getting open. This guy's demanding targets, but him and Richardson just have not been on the same page. So again, it is a lot more of a projection doing it now because we haven't seen the production. However, A.D. Mitchell was a guy I had ranked as a top 8 overall wide receiver in my grading cycle, get second round draft capital. Again, I understand it's a very risk reward type of proposition at this point, but I do believe in the talent enough to take him here.
Yeah, he is Spider-Man meme Dontavian Wicks. That's exactly what A.D. Mitchell is right now. He's the 4th receiver on his team in terms of, usage and routes and stuff like that. But I think all of us can see very clearly that he's like probably the best separator on his team, if not second best to Josh Downs. So he looks good when he's gotten opportunities. And if you think back to week 1, there was opportunities where he could have had a monster breakout performance. Remember, Anthony Richardson missed him for a long touchdown twice in that game. And that would have been pretty insane for A.D. Mitchell if he had started out his rookie campaign like that. Again, another one of these guys that if you were rebuilding, I would 100% send offers for, because Alec Pierce, for some reason, is still playing over him. Michael Pittman, of course, is going to play over him given the contract. Josh Downs plays in the slot, so they're not really competing for a role there. The crucial thing for A.D. Mitchell is whenever he supersedes Alec Pierce on the depth chart, maybe he needs to learn the playbook more. I don't know what it is. It's probably something behind the scenes that the coaches like about Pierce that they don't like about Mitchell. Eventually, it's going to happen. And A.D. Mitchell is going to skyrocket his way up dynasty rankings. So definitely, if you're a rebuilding team, go send some offers for A.D. Mitchell.
Yep, pretty much. But overall, who are you taking here at the 2-7? Because I feel like, again, you can consider a multitude of guys here.
Yeah, and this might be take lock for some, but I'm going to stick to my priors that Trey Benson was a top 2 running back in this class. I think you could definitely make the argument that Bucky Irving or Braylon Allen or Tyrone Tracy or whatever has looked really good, to the point that because Benson hasn't looked so good, and I'll show up his peripherals right now, you could make the argument that he hasn't looked as good as those guys, so he shouldn't be as high. He's only averaged like 2 PPR points per game. His PFF grade is actually among the like 10 or 11 lowest running backs in the NFL right now. But I kind of knew this about Trey Benson, man. Like, we knew Trey Benson was a little bit of a raw runner, and he was going to need some time to learn behind James Conner and figure out the NFL game and the NFL speed. So for me, I think there's going to be a point in time where Trey Benson starts to look a lot better. And once that time comes, the ceiling of value accumulation is going to be such that he's going to be very hard to buy. So if you're okay taking the risk on Trey Benson right now, I think he's one of the better buys in Dynasty, especially if you are a rebuilding team or a 1-year punt or whatever, because James Conner's old. He's probably not going to be there very long. Maybe he's there next year. I'm not exactly sure what his contract situation is. But I still look at Trey Benson as a guy that can gain a ton of value because, athletically, we're talking about a guy that's stacked up with the likes of Breece Hall and Jonathan Taylor, 3rd-round draft capital. If they were going to just keep James Conner for 3 more years.
This is Conner's final year.
Yeah, it's Conner's final year. And if they were going to plan on, extending James Conner the way we've seen with David Montgomery and Alvin Kamara in recent days, then they wouldn't have drafted a 3rd-round running back with top 75 draft capital. That's the way I look at the Trey Benson pick. And again, if they do extend James Conner, that's probably bad news for Trey Benson. And I would probably maybe look to sell him at that point. But I'm okay taking the risk that Conner's banged up. He's never finished a full season. It's possible that we get Trey Benson season very, very soon, within the next 5 to 10 games. And at least going into his 2nd year, I think he's going to show some improvement.
Yeah. And also, people might look at the overall season stats for Benson and be like, oh, he's been inefficient, this and that. He's only averaging 3.57 yards per carry on the year. But that is completely skewed by one bad game against the Rams, 11 carries for 10 yards, because he just hasn't gotten overall carries. When you look at his other games, only 3 touches in week 1, 4.33 yards per carry, 2 for 8 yards, 4 yards per carry in week 3, 9 carries for 50 yards, 5.56 yards per carry against Washington, 5 carries for 26 yards against Green Bay, didn't touch the ball at all against the Chargers. Again, is the usage right now very annoying if you drafted Benson? Again, I'm sure if you drafted him, you were high on him like we were, hasn't really gotten the opportunity yet. Absolutely. But James Conner has still never finished a full season in his NFL career. Do we really think that's going to change in his age 29 year?
No, probably not. And that's the other thing too, is that the second Benson, the switch flips for him, I think mentally it's going to be a movie. That's the way I look at it with Benson. He's going to eventually look like a pro style running back who has learned from James Conner. And once that happens, we've seen it with young players before.
We called them Breece Hall light.
Literally look at Tank Bigsby last year. He looked like the worst running back in the NFL. And then the switch flipped in his brain. And now he looks like one of the better running backs in the league. And I think Benson is going to look a lot like that, only he can catch the ball a lot better than Tank Bigsby.
Yeah. So Benson was my 2nd highest ranked player left when we took him. The guy that I did move above him, and I'm sure you could pretty much read the tea leaves here. You mentioned his name earlier. I was higher on him than you going into the prospect file. And yeah, you're already over his name. Tyrone Tracy, running back of the New York Giants. When we're looking at the overall peripherals of the situation, in terms of his efficiency, the rush yards over expected hasn't really been there, but also we know the offensive situation for the Giants also hasn't. We're looking at a good PFF grade. The points per game also, too, worth noting. In the two starts that he had, 3 starts actually. In the 3 starts he's had without Devin Singletary on the field, he has been very productive. And we're looking at a guy that, so in those 3 games, 14 PPR points, 22.7 PPR points, 6.2 PPR points, that has also done his work in the receiving game. In that stretch, he has 11 targets in those 3 games, including one game where he had 6 catches, 57 receiving yards. And with Tyrone Tracy, the biggest issue that I had with him coming to the NFL draft were, okay, well, he's a raw runner. He's very, very good at creating for himself in terms of the open field, breaking tackles, making people miss, has those natural rushing instincts when he's in the open field. What I wanted to see are, what are his rushing instincts when he has to find the hole, hit the gap, get upfield right away? Because obviously, again, running backs, when you have a lot of touches on your belt, that's the cycle that you get into. For Tyrone Tracy, because he was a converted wide receiver to running back, that was something that he wasn't really polished on in his game coming out. Well, guess what? I mean, he has looked like an NFL running back. The biggest thing I thought was, okay, would he look more like an athlete or would he look like a running back right away? No, he looks like a starting NFL running back. And we have already heard reports from Brian Dable that they want to feature him as the starter moving forward. I mean, it was reported going into that game against Philadelphia, he would see his workload uptick. And that was in a game where he had 70+% of the snaps. So when we're looking forward for Tyrone Tracy, I think the sky's the limit. Again, I think this Giants offense with Malik Nabers, another game coming off of that concussion, maybe he's a little bit healthier. Maybe Daniel Jones plays a little bit better down the stretch. I think at this current point, this is the floor projection of what we can expect the Giants offense to be. And if Tyrone Tracy is already going to be the lead RB1 on this team, I think there's a possibility he can have a stretch down the year where he is one of the league-winning running backs in fantasy. And we're talking about this guy as a 1-2 turn startup value. Or redraft value, sorry.
Yeah, no, I get you. I think that is definitely something that you could make. I mean, you made the case really well for Tracy. There's not much more I can add for him. He's definitely looked great. He's definitely commanding volume. And, from a redraft perspective, we're talking about a guy that has gained a lot of value in the recent game where Singletary came back and he was commanding most of the work still. So definitely don't mind that shout. I'm going to go to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and take my boy Bucky Irving here. And I do feel like this is probably maybe even a little bit too low for him. You could definitely have argued him over Benson and Tracy for sure, because he was a better prospect than Tracy and he's been better in the NFL so far than Benson. He is actually
I had Tracy ranked higher.
I think he was a better prospect than Tracy personally, just given the profile on paper, in addition to the film that we had with Bucky. And he has actually averaged the most PPR points per game of any running back in this rookie class so far. Of course, Benson is stuck behind Connor and Brooks is not even played yet, but Bucky Irving, 10.9 PPR points per game so far. He's been a 75.0 PFF grade. He's been solid when he's gotten opportunities. I think him and Rachaad White are still going to split touches along with Sean Tucker going forward, but there's not much else I have to say about Bucky Irving other than the fact that he is going to probably make this a 50-50 committee running back field going forward. And he's going to be like a RB2, RB3 flex play probably for the rest of the season and most of his rookie contract, if I had to guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's an ambiguous backfield, but also I'd argue right now that Bucky Irving has the lead in terms of potentially being the RB1 moving forward, just given the efficiency we have seen between the tackles. Now, obviously, Rachaad White's going to do his thing in the passing game. Sean Tucker's looked pretty good in spurts right now. But I would say if I had to project Tampa Bay again, you can correct me if I'm wrong, because you are obviously, of course, the Bucs fan. But like Bucky Irving has looked like the best pure rusher on this team and hasn't been close to me.
I think Tucker's the best one, to be honest.
You think so?
Yeah, I mean, at least from what we've seen so far this season, I think Bucky is he's the middle ground. Like Rashaad's the best receiver, Tucker's the best runner. Bucky's the one who's good at both, and that's good for him. Obviously, that's going to result in him getting more touches. So, what are you thinking here with 210?
Yeah, so again, we'll try to rapid fire these last few picks. We don't want to keep you guys forever, but this next pick for me, I mean, I so badly wanted to keep Jalen Polk here, but obviously, if you looked at some of those metric charts, he has not graded well. My next highest rated player is Braylon Allen, and the reason why is that I think you have to take the other running backs ahead of him because Breece Hall does exist in this backfield. However, what I've seen from Braylon Allen is that he's just simply a good NFL running back. And if it ever comes to the point where maybe Braylon Allen gets dealt, or maybe, for example, Breece Hall misses a stretch of time where he misses 4 weeks. You guys can see the metrics on the screen. 26% target rate and 86.4 PFF grade. 86.4 PFF grade. Him and Jalen Wright over 86 PFF grade, despite dealing with the backfields they currently are. Honestly, this is just a bet on talent here. And I understand that taking a handcuff running back at the end portion of the second round doesn't feel the most ideal. But I mean, where was Marshawn Lloyd and Blake Corum going in the rookie drafts this past year?
Yeah, no, exactly. They were the exact same bet, except, we know Braylon Allen's good. Corum and Lloyd hasn't played much, but Corum hasn't looked as good nearly as Braylon Allen. And again, we can't predict the future in the NFL. We don't know what's going to happen with Breece Hall. We don't know if he's going to stay healthy. We don't know if he's going to get extended by the Jets. We don't know if Braylon Allen's going to stay a Jet. We have no idea what's happening here. Again, you can't go too crazy with a guy like Braylon Allen because he is, by all indications, going to be a handcuff for the first 2 to 3 years of his career. At least that's what we're projecting now. But we know he's good. That's literally what it comes down to. It's early career A.J. Dillon. We knew he was good, and he was a handcuff to Aaron Jones. That was basically what A.J. Dillon was, and consistently was valued as like a top 24 dynasty running back as a result of that.
Yeah, and it almost feels like there's just nowhere to go but up here because everybody knows he's a premier handcuff, so his value is probably going to stay as a late second, early third round valuation. But like we said, if anything were to happen where Breece missed a long-term amount of time, he's one of the few handcuff running backs that I think you can legitimately get a first for if we expected 4+ weeks of Breece Hall out.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I'm actually going to go with Troy Franklin. I know Jalen Wright would be my next rated player. So if I was going to go with a running back, it would be him. Franklin has had pretty good metrics so far. I mean, he's got 23.5% targets per out run. The PFF grade's been up and down because he is a young player and he hasn't really looked the greatest play in and play out, but he was missed on a long touchdown. He dropped a long touchdown. Like, he has explosive traits to the point that you're going to get big spike weeks out of Troy Franklin, and him and Bo Nix are both kind of figuring it out together. That's the thing that I come back to with Franklin and Nix is that both of them look like rookies, but they're figuring it out together in the same offense while already having the chemistry that they built from college. So with both of these guys, I feel like both of them are half decent buys, expecting this Broncos offense to maybe look better in 6 weeks as opposed to what it looks like now.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very good lottery ticket type of bet, like you said. I mean, we just talked about this guy as a top 5 waiver pickup entering week 8. So if we're talking about him as a waiver pickup and redraft, and you're getting a rookie wide receiver with no real, I mean, we want to talk about Courtland Sutton. Courtland Sutton's been awful this year. I really don't think there's a real contender for him in terms of somebody he has to usurp to become the wide receiver one on this team. We already know, of course, that pre-existing chemistry with him and Bo Nix. It's really only skyrocketing from here moving forward. And same case for me for the guy I'm going to actually end off this video at. Don't look at the metrics for this guy. I'll just say it right now because the metrics is not inspiring for him. Like, if we're looking at the metrics, 0.6 yards per route run, 48.2 PFF grade, very, very bad target per route run rate. But I will be taking your Tampa Bay Buccaneer. And the reason why is that, fortunately for you, Corey, you might want to cover your ears when I say this. Chris Godwin's ankle, it's toast. He's not playing the rest of the year. Mike Evans is dealing with a re-aggravated hamstring injury that looked as severe of a hamstring injury as I possibly could have seen at the time. I mean, the way he went down, the way he tugged at it, like, I wouldn't be shocked if Mike Evans is held out to at least your bye week. And if that's the case,
I'm afraid Mike Evans' 1,000-yard streak might end this year.
And with that case being, has Jalen McMillan been great this year? Not at all. But what were we saying going into the NFL draft? His best role was in the NFL.
The Chris Godwin role.
And who's out?
Chris Godwin.
And who's going to play that role?
Jalen McMillan.
So when we're connecting the tea leaves here, I feel like buying him at 212 with the hope that the talented player we saw from Washington in the role that he was optimized for ends up producing in the next few weeks. I mean, I kind of mentioned like lottery ticket upside for all the guys like 205, 206 on, but I think it exactly applies to Jalen McMillan. It has not been a good rookie season, but if he does produce in the exact optimized role we saw the prospect to be, top 12 wide receiver for us in the class, I think it's appropriate. Again, this was a guy that was probably going 40, $50 in a lot of your home leagues.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's weird. All these Washington receivers, Odunze, McMillan, and Polk, have had slow starts to their NFL career. I wonder if that's a schematic thing coming from Ryan Grubb to, offenses that maybe they're not as familiar with or whatever the case is.
Which is weird because you would think JSM would thrive if that was the case.
You would, yeah. But speaking of Jalen Polk, he was in our second round, but it is completely Jover at this point. If you could see his raw separation grade combined with his catch point and yak grade, if you're looking for Jalen Polk, he's quite easy to find because he is in the bottom left corner away from every other rookie receiver on this chart.
He's literally the worst receiver in the league right now.
Yeah,
And it's not
he
close.
is. And you can see some of the other rookies that I've highlighted. Luke McCaffrey, we didn't talk about, but he's been separating at a decent level. Nabers, of course. If you're in the top right quadrant of this, it means you're a good receiver. You're performing as a good receiver right now. Brian Thomas, Malik Nabers, McConkey, Odunze. There's a little red dash there with Odunze and Troy Franklin right below Lad McConkey. That's where they kind of slot in. McMillan hasn't been great from a catch point standpoint, but he has been good separation-wise. And then Worthy, same thing. Marvin Harrison, Keon Coleman have been kind of the opposite. They've been good at the catch point, but not necessarily from a separation standpoint. So again, there's other names we could have talked about. I would have taken Jalen Wright over McMillan. You could have talked about Ray Davis, Blake Corum, Marshawn Lloyd, who we haven't seen yet. Javon Baker might get activated here pretty soon, potentially for the Patriots. Ben Sinnott, Jatavian Sanders have had, some flashes at the tight end position. But this was a 2-round rookie redraft. We went super in depth with this one. So if you guys did enjoy it, leave a like down below. Subscribe to the channel if you're new around here. Our updated dynasty rankings, overall, super flex, one quarterback, rookies, quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, all that good stuff is available on flockfantasy.com. Use the promo code FSE when you sign up for 7 days for free, 30% off any of the packages, and 6 months for free, and a free team review when you sign up annually. Our dynasty trade value chart is live right now, all updated with 2025 rookie pick values, as well as kind of what we think of these players going forward amongst the dynasty positional landscape. So if that interests you, go ahead and check it down below. Link is in the pinned comment and in the description. But with that being said, peace out, and we'll talk to you soon.